You're just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
Come here, though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Are you ready?
Hello, friend.
Oh, well, hey there, you little rascal.
Hey, how are you doing, brother?
Dude, I'm unbelievable now, man. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm like actually like super stoked that you're jumping on here because you're a person I've wanted to actually have on here and chat with for a little while now. Let me see if this is a little better. There's really some kind of like technical issue that I'm working with, so
I know I actually have not. Are you getting any echo or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
the echoes. I know that issue is, and it's always like such a distracting pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun for you.
Well, because, I just upgraded my podcast studio, so I got this new Rodecaster,
Yeah.
and I haven't used it on IG Live yet, so we'll see. But
I don't even know, like, yeah, so like I'm sure you did like your homework to figure this stuff out. Like this is actually one of the things I want us to kind of like chat about a little bit because, I was giving like a little brief synopsis of who you were and stuff before you jumped on, but the idea basically that like we've known each other since high school, and it's like you've always been like the most take it to 11 person I know. I mean, like you were powerlifting and you were powerlifting, like when you were like 15 or something like this, like you were the most jacked dude I'd ever seen.
I don't
you
know.
know,
Not
and
anymore, but yeah.
no, but it's like you're still like gonna outlive everybody I know. So, you know, but I was gonna say like, why don't we do this? It's like let's give everybody like the Berardo pitch. It's like give us an idea of like who you are, what you do, and yeah, like we'll take it from there.
Yeah, a little elevator pitch. I dig it. So yeah, we've known each other for a while, and it's great. First off, thanks for having me on. This is exciting. It's good to see your face finally. I just wish I can
Just tickle the face.
tickle, tickle. But so I have a background in fitness. I used to work at my first real career was a personal trainer, and I got certified through NFPT and ACE, and that was at LA Fitness where I had my own clients, and then I realized that I didn't really like training as much as I liked the one-on-one interaction, and I think that's what I really loved about personal training. And I don't know how it is now with the influencer game, but back in the day, trainers did not get paid a lot. I mean, it was a little bit above hourly wage. So I was like, I want to try something different. So I decided to kind of branch off into the beverage industry, which my father has 20-year experience in. So I started off at Coca-Cola, did some warehouse work to kind of move up because I couldn't be in his same industry, like in sales.
Yeah, it's like a family thing, right? It's like
Right.
it's like
Conflict
that
of
with
interest.
hotels as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So I decided, all right, let me start in the warehouse, just loading pallets. And, that's when I was in the best shape of my life, 16, 17, jacked. I was doing weightlifting on the side and trying to compete and things like that. So I was hauling cases, and, back then they paid you commission. So every case that you put on a pallet, you got paid. So it's me, a jacked young dude versus like 50-year-old men in the warehouse. So I'm making tons of dough as a kid. I'm super excited. But again, it didn't really tickle my one-on-one interaction type of thing. So I decided to get more in the marketing and sales game. And that's when my dad got out of the beverage industry, and I was able to get into it. And I spent 10 years in the beverage industry, and now still I work at Monster Energy as the marketing manager for the whole state of Florida. So
It's just awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the
I
dream
think that
job.
it is because it's one of those things where I think it's so interesting to be able to actually be like it's like I'm watching Breaking Bad again for like the 12th time right now.
Of course.
And it's like, I am on this one particular episode where at the end, like Walt tells Jesse, it's just like, why would you ever want to leave being the best at something that you do? And I know that it's kind of like a different scale of things. Like you're not Heisenberg, but it is interesting in a sense where it's just like, you are like for the entire state of Florida, it's like you're running that. So I think that's dope. So
It's crazy.
continue.
Yeah. No, totally. And that's kind of the reason why, I was so intrigued with that role was we never had the position when I started working at Monster. So they just started the position because Florida is just such a hot spot for festivals, events, NASCAR, Monster Jam, music festivals galore. So it was kind of an honor to take on the role. And there's definitely something satisfying in when you put on an event like that and then 50,000 people go and they have a blast and they don't know behind the scenes stuff, but just in the back of my head, that's that type of interaction that I love, which is just watching people's faces, having a good time. And, it's taking care of my sales and marketing kind of itch that I had. And it's definitely a dream job and I want to keep growing. But, like you alluded to with the podcast, that's been my passion for like the past 13 months. So I'm only 70 episodes in, but I went from
only 70 episodes. Yeah.
Well, you know me, dude. We talked about this before. Where if I didn't have a full-time job, like I'd be 1,500 episodes, and I'd have like my own warehouse in the garage just for my studio. Like I would have the Mac Daddy. So it's getting there, but it's also newly married. We just hit our 2-year anniversary, so the wife says hi. By the way, she's downstairs listening.
Hey.
But being married, and we're trying to buy house number 3, so we just got.
I live in an apartment in New York City, so like no big deal. Don't rub it in my face.
But I between you and me, I would probably take that over these houses because apartment in New York. I mean, come on, that's the dream.
I'm going to tell you right now, don't do that. Especially right now, don't do that.
Yeah, that's a good call. But that's the thing is that juggling so many balls, it's been kind of tough to do my passion because it's hard to explain. And, I love what you're doing with your channel and have for a while, but I'm sure you can relate to this to where it's definitely like I feel almost like it's my calling, like it's a huge passion of mine. And it's kind of frustrating because I know, monetarily there's nothing I could do I could stop my job and focus 100%. And I know I could be great at it, but then I'm also kind of torn because like I do have the dream job. So it's almost like you're into fitness and you're super hardcore into fitness, but then you also want to bodybuild and you're like, I would love it, but I don't know if there's a lot of money into it. So it's like, you have these hobbies that you want to turn into careers, but it's very hard to pull that trigger. And I'm sure you could probably relate with that as well.
So, I mean, and yes, I can. And so what I want to do is this, it's like, I want to dive back just like a little bit and let's start talking about, with Monster first, and then we'll kind of get into the podcast stuff and then kind of take things from there as well. But, with the Monster thing in general, I actually think it's really interesting, especially kind of right now, because, you even said it yourself, it's like you're responsible for basically like putting together these, and like, if you guys don't know Florida, like Florida is, it's known for like bath salts and like festivals. That's about it, And so it's like, to see these events and these festivals that like Tony is putting together with like Monster Energy and like Rain, it's like these are, like you said, NASCAR sporting events. These are like the strongman events. These are any event that you can think of. Like I'm sure there's like a spelling bee out there that's sponsored by Monster Energy in some way, And what's interesting about that is that it's like, you are responsible for kind of like setting this up so that as many people will join as possible. And now that is actually one of the most frightening things and I feel like it's going to be like that for some time. Maybe not in Florida because I'm from Florida. Okay. Because I can say this shit. It's just like Florida is fucking stupid. Okay. People in Florida right now are pissing me off just like Georgia and a lot of other places. Yeah. But the thing that is so true though is that it's just like this is what you do. This is your bread and butter, and this is one of those situations where it's just like you're responsible for setting these things up. And I want to kind of discuss with you, like, what do you think are your thoughts and your feelings on like this kind of like current COVID climate? What do you think is going to be like post-COVID? Like, how is this going to affect things? Because most of the people I talk to are just kind of like creatives that are like taking photos, they're shooting videos, they're directors and filmmakers and things like this. But, I think it's going to be very different for you, as this is definitely a way that you actually make your income. But at the same time, like you're responsible and working with like this global chain,
Totally. Yeah. No, it's a good question. We definitely have pondered it a lot these last, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it's been. And, I think we have a good plan in place from an event standpoint, at least for the whole company. We are worldwide now. thanks to Coca-Cola and our partnership with them. So we do events all over the globe. You know, you got things in Mexico, Europe, Bali. I mean, we do stuff all over. And obviously this is a global pandemic. So I think we have a good solution to it. One of those things is kind of beneficial to us because we usually are the sponsorship, right? We're the title sponsor. So there's a lot of events that we have on our own that we put on. But, you know, like NASCAR is a good example because we're just the official energy drink. So we're a sponsor of it. So whatever precautions NASCAR takes, we just kind of piggyback off that. So that's kind of a huge positive for us because if an event stops, it's not that we're hurting at all because it's not necessarily our event. But to answer your question, how would we kind of brand ourselves without the events, right? Because when you think of Monster Energy, you think of, you know, dirt bikes, badass, ramps, skateboarders. I mean, you think of...
Exactly. It's an extreme... Yeah, it's like... And I know that it's kind of like, it's bad to cross-contaminate branding and stuff like this, but it is kind of one of those things for like Red Bull and Monster Energy. The two of them are like hand in hand, you know, responsible for kind of like funding and building up a lot of the extreme sports that we know. Somebody actually also asked, like, are they allowed in Disney World? I don't know this. Like, do you know this?
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, I think because in Shanghai they just opened them up at I think it was 25 or 30% capacity or something like that. So
Yeah.
and then they would put in the restriction of the 6 feet in lines. So I think Orlando's going to open up. I know Universal's June 15th. I don't know about Disney though. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's just like anything else, right? Like once that opens up the floodgates at Universal, I mean, I think Disney's going to hop on and all those other theme parks. But that's a good question. I mean, again, that's kind of the same concept as like, what do we do with theme parks? You know, is Disney going to be hurting? Well, probably not because Disney's awesome. But, you know, they have Disney Plus and all this stuff now, movies. And Disney really kind of diversified their portfolio in the right time because God forbid something happens where they're like, we got to shut down Disney for a year. They'll be like, we're good. Go ahead. You know,
Like I'm sure they're feeling it and stuff in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, it's like they are like they own everything.
Right,
you know, it's like in a week they're gonna own you. So it's like you know, like they'll have Monster Energy as like their
I'm waiting on the call. I can't wait. But yeah, you know, so we kind of got a good plan set up. We're doing a lot of virtual stuff now, which is cool. You know, I'm in talks of Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski is one of our athletes. And we did in Miami for the Super Bowl at Gronk Beach, which was a blast. And I had a call with them, and they said it's still a go. But prior to it, they're going to do this virtual kind of a Gronk Beach thing where it's going to be Shaq and him virtually, and they're going to challenge each other to do different things. So, like, maybe it's a chugging contest. Maybe it's, like, eat a whole pita pie. And it's going to be live, but in between those challenges, there's going to be, like, Diplo and Tiesto and you know, all these different artists, and it's going to be all virtual. So, you know, instead of paying $150 a ticket, you're going to pay $20-25 and you get to see it on your TV. So I think that might be the future for a lot of events, not necessarily what we're doing in particular, but it'll be interesting. You know, I think years ago we had these conversations. Our parents said, you know, this radio thing is the future. And, you know, no one listens to the radio anymore. So I think, you know, we always thought to ourselves festival was the way to have fun, but who knows, man? I mean, you follow a lot of VR and AR and stuff like that. I mean, it might come down to it to where you could throw on some goggles and, you know, sit in your living room with your family and your kids, and you could be at the NBA Finals and you're not physically there. Is it going to be as cool? Probably not, but I don't know, man. I think this is going to kind of ramp up that digital age of things. I mean, look at what's happening with Zoom.
Yeah,
I mean, no one knew. Zoom's been around for almost 10 years.
And I never even heard of it until like 2 months ago.
Like, I mean, you know? I got family members that have stock in Zoom, and they bought it at like $12 a share. And now
they're sitting pretty.
So it's like, you know, I don't know, man. It's just one of those weird things where that's why I love having, and I preach about it all the time on my podcast where I preach about having your passion. So like marketing is my passion. So I don't know what I would do if something did happen, you know, in this career. But if it did, I know I have fitness to fall back on and podcasts to fall back on. And that's why I'm trying to pull Disney, as they speak, and diversify as much as.
So let's do a little pivot really quickly. So again, you know, it's like you've been working with Monster and Coke and like that family for like years at this point. You know, you've been able to actually build yourself up to this platform. And then what's really interesting as well is the fact that it's like you took this, I mean, because again, like you're like me in the sense where you love to just talk to people. It's like, like you and I saw each other for the first time a couple of, maybe like a year or 2 years ago or something at this point. The other day.
Crazy.
And and it's one of those things where it's like you are taking this platform where you're able to basically like interview the people that you want to talk to, ask them the questions that you want to ask them. Oh, that was weird.
What was that, you or me?
I don't know, I can't tell. It was like a weird delay, I think, but
Okay.
Anyway. But it's like you're getting this opportunity to kind of like talk to these people and stuff now. And I'm kind of curious, like, one, like what made you actually want to, pull the trigger about this? You actually just talked about this in a recent podcast episode of yours, by the way. So like, you don't have to get too redundant about it if you don't want to, but like, talk about like the processes that made you want to kind of like dive into podcasting, and I don't know, like either maybe some struggles you had, or maybe even just like what motivated you, or if there was like a particular person that motivated you to do this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it had to do with, because I've always had a blog, not as, again, just as a hobby. It wasn't really aggressive as much as I wanted it to, but I found out that a blog is just, or excuse me, a podcast is just a written blog. I mean, in audio form. That's really all a podcast is. And I love typing, but I started really being a fan of podcasts probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Obviously Rogan was a big inspiration.
Yeah.
I still listen to him every day. He's the king, especially with that nice little deal he got, right?
Yeah.
And then, other different podcasts that I realized that there's so many people just talking about their passion. And, just listening to those podcasts and understanding that they have a passion, they're just, all they're doing is speaking into mic and sharing it. And that to me really intrigued me, I think, as a whole. So I would probably say, to answer your question, 5 years ago, I really wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't really know the steps to do it. So, of course, watching YouTube channels and, different creators and influencers that really talk about how to grow a podcast and start a podcast. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I'm good at it. I don't know if I could bring value to people. All I know is I'm passionate about health, fitness, wellness, being positive, starting from nothing, trying to grow it into something. I just want to talk about that. So it really started off me just grabbing a phone and a normal headset and pressing voice memo on my iPhone and just recording stuff. And the only reason I did it was to vent, because my wife was sick of hearing me at the time. We were newly engaged, and I think that's when I ran into you last, where that's when I really started kind of getting into it and just speaking my mind. Like if something was on my mind or someone cut me off in traffic, I would pull over and whip out voice memo and just start venting. Yeah. And at first it was like an outlet for me. Like I didn't post it. And then I realized that because I have a blog already, all I had to do was take that audio MP3 file, put it on my website. That's a podcast. It was just that easy. So that's what I started doing. And then I started getting a little bit more creative with it, having specific episodes talking about specific things that I wanted to talk about. And then kind of people started noticing around like episode 5 or 6. And they're like, hey man, I really enjoyed that last episode. And I was like, oh shit, people are listening to this. Oh yeah. Well, maybe I need to start to get a little bit more educated. So then I started researching, and then I started doing it just not just for me, but for other people too. Cause there could be I started thinking to myself, well, there was a guy that I listened to, and I think it was, I think you follow Matt Diavella. Thank you. So
Matt's a savage.
Oh, he's the beast, dude. He's the man. So I really started listening to him about 2 years ago. And I was like, if he didn't have a podcast, I probably wouldn't know how easy it is to do a podcast, because he did an episode like 2 years ago about it. And I was like, what if there's someone out there that doesn't follow him, but maybe is friends of a friend with me, and they could listen to my podcast and get value out of it. So I'm like, I'm kind of doing an injustice to not really talk about it if I want to talk about it, because it could bring value to people. And that's what really attracted me to it. And then, I slowly started kind of dumping money into it a little bit here and there. I talk about it a lot on the podcast, to where just like anything else, like photography, like you gave me some great advice to where you're like, because I had the Canon, right? And you had like the Sony, and when I was up in New York, you whipped up the big lens, and I'm like, yo, bro, I want to get that. And you're like, well, just make sure make sure you're passionate about it. Don't get it because it's a good camera, because I think you said something to me where it's like, it's not the subject, or no, it's not the camera, it's the subject or something like that, to where you could do a good picture with an iPhone if you wanted to.
Yeah, I
Right,
mean,
so-
like I talk about that all the time. I even actually just finished a video that I'm going to be sharing maybe like tomorrow or
Oh,
something.
cool.
But it's one of those things where I talk often about, like, because I am the worst when it comes to this. Like, I am all about gear porn. Like, I have way too much shit. It's like,
Yeah.
whether it's cameras or lenses and lighting and everything else. And so this is actually coming from like actual experience, where it's like I say these things and it might come off hypocritical because like, yo, Hicks, you got like all of the shit. It's just like I'm saying this to my friends that don't worry about getting like gear porn heavy and like investing in a ton of shit, because like, at the end of the day, it's like there are a few things that I recommend people invest in. Like I always tell people, like, if you're going to dump your money into something, dump it into glass, like dump it into a lens, or a couple of lenses, because I guarantee you, like 6 months, or even like basically as soon as you open the box, for a camera, that value, it's like driving a car off a lot. Like the second you drive the car off the lot, it's like the value is, yeah, exactly. The value depreciates like exponentially,
Yeah, totally.
and it's like that with cameras. And so what I try to encourage people is just like, hey, it's like work from your priorities, your foundations. Like, if you were just getting started, it's like you are not in a position where you should be investing, like thousands of dollars, because the reality is that it's like, and I'm sure it's kind of getting like this with like podcasting, with audio and stuff in particular, but it's just like with filmmaking, or like cameras and photography, like it is, I had to like single-handedly pick like one of the most expensive mediums you could possibly choose,
It's literally,
so,
there's nothing more expensive than the medium you're in.
yeah, it's like, why couldn't I get into fucking finger painting or something like this,
Right.
where it's just like get artsy and just make a difference in the world with finger paints and stuff.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that, it's but it's like that is something that I do talk about. And so getting into that, it's like, I love that approach where you're kind of like, as you're getting started, it's like you are taking it in this very DIY approach of things, but still like you've always had this element of raising the value, which I think is the most important part, because kind of going back to what we had literally just said, it's like you can have a $10,000 podcasting setup and stuff like this, but if you don't have the value to be able to deliver to an audience that's going to listen to it, what's the point?
Yeah,
And it's the
totally.
same thing with photography and filmmaking as well. It's like, there's so many people that have these 8K red helium, like cameras, that are like $20,000 with like their crazy lenses and like all of the gimbals,
Right.
and like all, and at the end of the day, it's just like, especially right now, it's just like, what are you doing with that? And how are you using these tools to actually better other people in your career as well? So,
No,
but
totally,
yeah, get in
man.
there. So continue.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you were talking about it.
No, well said. I mean, I think you can relate that to anything. I always kind of relate a lot of stuff that I do with fitness, but I mean, just even talking about the filmmaking aspect, there's one film, I think it's called Lockout. It's on Netflix. I don't know. It's got Guy Pearce in it. And it's like 8 years old. And the only reason I say that is because like there was an article that came out where it's in Netflix's top 10 because it's starting to get some traction, which is interesting. And it's 8 years old. And there's a lot of movies out there at Netflix where like hidden gems. And it's just funny you brought up filmmaking and red cameras, because they did not shoot this on a red camera. There was good footage, not a whole lot of special effects, but the acting was horrible. So to your point, you talk about content and the product. So if they had red cameras but the acting was horrible, that's a shitty movie. But if the acting's really, really good and it's all shot on an iPhone, that might entice you a little bit more. Like it doesn't, but there has to be a median in there in between. And I think that's the key to any good creator. From what I've learned anyway, is I didn't necessarily have the content at first. So to me, just my own edification, I didn't deserve the good equipment.
Yeah.
I wanted to get my content to where it needed to be. And then when I felt a little bit more good about it, I'd invest like a Zoom H6. And that was my first recording. And then, when I was like, okay, I got a sponsorship now. So now that I got a sponsorship, maybe I'll take that money and I'll put it into, put it aside and use that for equipment because I deserve it. It's kind of like, it's my reward. And that's how I think we should all grow with a lot of different things.
And like one of my favorite filmmakers, she's also a director as well, has been for a little while now, but like Reed Morano, like she's shot and DP'd like a ton of amazing films. She did like the first few episodes of Handmaid's Tale. She just had like a new film that recently came out. You know, and it's one of those things where like she for years would always kind of say the same thing along those lines, where it's like, you know, it's your responsibility as a creative, you know, let's broaden it to a creative, but it's like, especially when you're working in the capacity of involving other people, you know, whether it's like one person or an entire crew of people, it's your responsibility to make sure that whatever it is that you are actually investing your time and your money into doing is going to be worth it for the other people that are actually listening and helping and working with you. Because at the end of the day, it's like when you've got a film like Lockout, you know, which is, you know, it's like, it's definitely was, if it's got Guy Pearce in it, then it was more than likely at least like a $10 million film, you know,
Sure.
like on the low end of the spectrum, you know.
And half that's his paycheck. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things where it's just like, you know, it's a shame when somebody get something greenlit and or like whatever it might be, you know, and it's like it's not really like elevated to the place that it should be for other people.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, even look at like the Marvel movies, right? Like imagine the acting was great in those. I mean, they're superhero movies, sure, but I mean, they're great storylines. They're the best thing in the world. But
Yeah.
then, you know, and I'm a DC nut, so it's hard for me to say this, but then you look at something like DC where they have the same money, they have the
Yeah.
same capability, the acting's kind of the same, it could be, I guess, but if you take like a Robert Downey Jr. and put him in like a DC movie, it wouldn't be as good. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to like think again, it's that happy median of where it has to be. And I think a lot of that has to do with passion too. Like, you know, I was really passionate starting off, but again, I wanted to kind of see how I could grow myself and really see if I was interested in it. You know, this quarantine, I was having a good conversation with my buddy who's a trainer down south on the last podcast, Tony Thomas.
I heard that one. Dude's so cut.
Dude, it's kind of annoying, but he's a great guy for sure. But I was having this chat with him where I'm like, hey man, how do you keep people motivated during quarantine? And he really, something I didn't think about, but he gave me some great advice where he's like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, meaning when it comes to fitness, you shouldn't be going out and buying $2,000 worth of workout equipment, which is kind of what we're talking about. Because if you don't want to work out, buying new shit and cool shit is not going to get you to work out. He's like, stay at home with no weights, do some cardio, do some running, do some plyometrics, do something that gets you in shape first, get the motivation to get in shape, and then invest a little bit heavily into the equipment. Don't go out and buy a $200 a month membership because now you're just wasting money, and then you don't go, and then you get discouraged, and then now you're discouraged, you're out of shape, and you don't have any money. So it's like, those are the three things you really don't want. And I think that could apply with a lot of different things. So
doing like a little pivot right now really fast, you know, it's like one thing I did want to actually talk about is, you know, it's like, so fitness has always been like a really big part of your life. Like even again, like since I've known you and stuff, you know, it's like you've always been just like when I was in high school, the last thing I wanted to do is like pick something heavy up or like go jog and be like, no, yeah. And then it's like, yeah, and I don't know if you remember me, but it's like in high school, like I was an absolute stick. Like I was the smallest person ever, you know.
I think I sent it to you a while ago. I don't know if I have it somewhere, but it's a ridiculous picture of you and me, and you're so skinny. And I look
so tiny.
I look at you now, and I'm like, that's not the same person. There's no way. Like this is not.
Yeah, I know.
Same.
It's even like, I mean, dude, even like 4 years ago, I'm a different person versus, you know, like 10 or 15 years ago, I was small.
And no tattoos, by the way. I know it's hard.
No tattoos.
Hard for people to believe that. They're like, what? Bobby with no tattoos? That's weird.
You know, but it's like, so like you've always been really into fitness and stuff. And then one of the things I think is interesting is like, you know, you had a very classic kind of just like bodybuilding diet at the time. You know, it's like it was a lot based around, you know, just like chicken and like carbs and basically protein, carbs, and low fat. You know, it's like you had that lifestyle, you know.
Yeah, the stuff you're supposed to eat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then it's like basically you talk about this all the time in your podcasts and stuff as well, which I think is actually helpful for a lot of people because not a lot of people are really familiar with what Crohn's is, but you got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And, you know, like I wanted to see if you might be able to actually kind of talk about like what it was like to kind of get this diagnosis and then how you were able to kind of like prioritize your focus and then just flip it around to your advantage.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for that. And, it's weird too, because again, you know, because you've known me for so long, you know that if it's something that, like if I broke my leg or something, that wouldn't bother me, because I knew I would recover. So when it comes to something like this, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's 5 years ago, it was like I couldn't. You can ask the wife. I couldn't muster the strength to admit it to myself that this is a chronic illness. It ain't going away. There's no cure for it. It does affect eating, which, as you said, was a big portion of my life. And, you know, the doctor told me, listen, you're probably not going to get above 145 pounds, maybe 150 for a long time, because I can't intake a lot of food. And there's a lot of different Crohn's disease. I mean, not one person is the same when it comes to that disease, but like what I have is a very rare case to where if I get too full, I get backed up, you know, and my stomach gets bloated and I have to get pumped, not to get too graphic, but it's pumped this way. So they have to empty my stomach like I had too much alcohol. You know what I mean? Most Crohn's patients, it's the opposite. It's like, you know, you have spicy food, you got to run to the bathroom. I kind of wish sometimes that was my case, because for me, I don't know when it's coming. It could happen in a year. It could happen, you know, every month. I just don't know. And it got to one point where it was happening every quarter. So every 3 months, I would have to go to the hospital. I would spend a week in the hospital. I'd lose 15, 20 pounds. I'd have to get pumped out. And it was really aggressive. This was about 4 years ago. So after having it for a year on a bunch of medication and no one was really giving me the right answer, I thought to myself, you know, I got to stop eating the way I do. I got to stop training the way I do. And you know me, that was hard for me to so it took about 18 months for me to really swallow my pride and say, you know, it is what it is. There's more important things, you know, in life than working out and eating. And I still
This is a very like aptly placed pun, by the way. He's like, I had to swallow my pride, hoping it would go down.
But it was hard, man. It was so fucking hard. And you know, once I did it and I changed up my eating habits a little bit, that's when my symptoms started getting better, which was interesting. I didn't put a lot of strain on my body. You know, I stretched a lot more. I did a lot more yoga, more meditation, more things that don't inflame my body. And a lot of people don't know that eating till you're full, that's going to inflame your body. Your body doesn't know what to do with that stuff. So eating a lot less meals, eating less meat, more plant-based. Now I'm full vegan. Unless you're really
You've
vegan.
been that way for about a year or so.
Yeah. I think even last time I saw you, I was kind of like going half and half, but now I'm a full year, and I haven't had any episodes since, thank goodness. But you know, I think a lot of it just has to do with just not putting stress on your body. You know, when you work out and you try to max out every single day in the gym, which is what I was doing, your body doesn't have time to recover. It doesn't know what to do. It's inflamed all the time. You know, your bones are cracking, your muscles are expanding. A lot's going on in your body you don't know, and that's just putting strain. So when I have this disease and my body's trying to do a lot of other stuff to help me recover, it can't focus on the disease, and that's kind of the issue with a lot of diseases. You know, not just Crohn's. So just educating myself and really getting a little bit more open-minded to how to help. And you know, it's still hard to do every now and then when I go in the gym. It's hard not to max out and do what I want to do. But then I thought, okay, so get really, really big and be jacked like I used to, or live longer.
Yeah. And then we actually had a question. It was like, how did you find out about this? You know, it's like you said, this happened about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. You know, like, is this something where, you know, you ended up just, I don't know, like you just something happened, you got hospitalized and they just diagnosed you right there?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because you also said it's rare. So it's like, I don't know, like, you know, like how they actually.
Yeah, it's that was the most important part. That's actually, I should have left out everything except that. So what happened about 5 years ago was I've always been kind of constipated, not really feeling comfortable all the time. You know, sometimes you might feel uncomfortable like after a big meal. Well, me, it was like all the time. And this was probably about 7-8 years ago when I really started getting into, you know, working out more and eating a lot. Like I was eating 6 times a day. You know, sometimes I do 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, and I would just pound it. And I was like, it's probably just because I'm eating a lot, right? Well, eventually one time it got to the point to where I couldn't take the pain. It was so bad. So I went to the hospital, and once they clean me out first and they go, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know, but I think this might be a couple issues. You might have IBS, you might have Crohn's, you might have some things going on. And then I was like, no way. I eat like this. I eat clean, blah, 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 the typical meathead answer, right? And then they're like, well, why don't we do a colonoscopy? Let's check it out. And, you know, I'm 29, 30 at the time, I think. Yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah, so I'm like, colonoscopy? No, that's for 50-year-olds, man. I'm doing that. Turns out they did it. And
Turns out they did it. I don't even remember it.
turns out I just woke up one day, my pants were down, and so, and I don't remember it. They
Left me a mint in my pillow.
there's a little note that said it was good for me. So, but no, they didn't. They came back and said, yeah, you have a mild case. It's a little rare. We don't really know a whole lot, but you know, we can go back in if you want and do a biopsy. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. Let's do this the right way. So long story short, after about a year of, you know, fighting the good fight and trying to, you know, again, deny that I had anything, just listen to the experts and, you know, doing the right procedure to find out. And then they tried to put me on a bunch of medication after that. And it's just trial and error. You know, it's every person is different. You know, that happened to me. But if you're out there suffering from similar symptoms, it might just be constipation. It might not be Crohn's. But you know, that's kind of what I told myself. And then once I went to the ER and they took care of me, that's when I found out that I had it. So
what's kind of wild about it is that it's like, you know, there's one person that I had known, this really nice guy that I knew when I was still living in Florida, and like he was the only person I'd ever heard of that had Crohn's, and I had never heard of that. I didn't know what it was. I found out later on that Daryl Colombo from Glassjaw, you know, it's like he has Crohn's, you know,
right.
And it was one of those things where I was just like, man, it's so weird. Like I've never even heard of this. And then all of a sudden, like over the past, I'd say like 5 or 6 years, it's just like everywhere you go, like I can't tell you how many people I haven't met that don't have something like Crohn's.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is it's like, you know, because you've done a lot of research over the years, you know, it's like you've done a huge focus in your dietary change and shift, and like you've motivated a lot of people as well to kind of like think differently about the way that they eat food and they kind of like purchase food. I mean, like you regularly go to like a farmer's market, you know, it's like you're eating organic and as green as possible all the time, you know, like you try to cut out any processed shit, you know. And what I think is kind of interesting about it is that it's just like, you know, do you think that this has anything to necessarily do with just like
a correlation
your
to
genes?
Oh.
Yeah. Do you think there's any kind of correlation? Do you think this is a genetic element that you just kind of like picked up? Or do you think that there's some kind of correlation? Or do you think it's even just more like, you know, look with a lot of diseases to see today and people are just like, wow, but like we didn't realize we had this kind of cancer for X, Y, and Z. And it's just also because like we didn't have a testing before, you know?
Totally. Yeah. So, and that could be it too. I mean, you know, maybe there's something in the last few years that popped up to where now they could test for Crohn's a little bit easier, to your point. And, you know, yeah, you do see it everywhere because you see those TV commercials. If you watch commercials nowadays, I occasionally do, but you know,
we have Hulu. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I don't pay for the ad free shit. I'm taking the ads, bro. But yeah, you do see it a lot more. And I think a lot of that has to do, I think there's a couple factors. Crohn's in particular, and IBS has been proven that it's not necessarily hereditary. However, to me, it kind of is hereditary because I feel like if I wasn't Italian and my dad wasn't larger and liked to eat, I probably wouldn't have it. Meaning, I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of food we consume and the
it's like
strain.
epigenetics.
Yeah,
you know, it's
exactly.
like it's like genetics, but at the same time, like genetics that are like adaptable and like malleable to your environment and the way that you, like, for example, like my dad was the same way. He was massively overweight his entire life, or at least like as long as I was alive, like always very overweight and stuff like this. You know, he had diabetes, you know, it's like he passed away, but it's one of those things where like my brother and I, like we are doing everything in our power. So even though like I still enjoy eating, yeah, exactly. I enjoy eating regular food. You know, it's like I eat, you know, gummy bears because I love them and stuff. But I'm also like, I do as much as possible to stay as physically fit. I try to find challenges and ways to kind of like force myself into this position where I'm just like, this is a goal. I want to reach this goal, you know?
No doubt.
And
you
know, it's just like,
yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, you're right, because you know, my grandmother passed away from type 2 diabetes, had both of her legs amputated, and you know, it was kind of hard on our family because we've lived off that for a while. That kind of fear of you know, that not just that disease, but just obesity as a whole. And again, you know, I always say I don't regret anything that happened in my childhood, because I enjoyed every second of eating all that Italian food and going crazy. And I can't do that anymore, unfortunately. But it's just one of those things where you talked about it a second ago, where now we're getting more research and more studies. Where I think our parents just didn't know, man. They knew that.
It.
Yeah, they knew pasta.
Also, the era where like smoking is just like, do it. Your doctor does it.
It was like we call it propaganda now, but it wasn't propaganda. It was them actually believing that shit was good for you. It's like the mac and cheese was 99 cents and you could feed the family for a week. So of course they bought a bunch of it. So you can't really hate on it. But I think now all as humans, as we get older, whether you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, you have to understand that, what we intake and what we do, including working out and eating right, it's a big portion of how our body reacts to things. And I strongly believe that me eating as much as I did, not when I was a kid, but when I was like bulking up and I was 185 pounds at one point. And I'm 5'5".
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think it's actually important for you to put that in there as well, because you were like, you might drop down to like 140 or 50 pounds. Like height and body build and everything like that does have like a huge thing to do with it. You're a 5'5", I'm like just under 6 foot, and it's just like the difference. Like, so if I were to weigh 150 pounds, I would be like really, really small. I weigh like 200 pounds right now.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's the thing, right? Is like it's kind of hard to accept that, to where I was 185 pounds at one point, and then they're telling me I'm not going to get above 145, and that's because my body cannot intake the amount of calories and food that I was intaking. And I strongly believe, because Crohn's, all Crohn's is just scarring in the intestines. And once it's a scar, depending on where it's at, would dictate the type of Crohn's disease it is. But I think that's what happened, is I was just putting a lot of strain on my intestines. My immune system was probably shot because I wasn't intaking the right foods. I was just intaking chicken and steak and brown rice and, all this type of shit that I thought was good for me. And I didn't do my research, obviously, because I just wanted to intake a lot of calories. And then my intestines was like, oh, really? Is this how we're going to do this? Okay, fuck you, bucko. Crohn's disease. Boom.
Bucko. So one thing I actually have a question about, and just kind of for perspective, we have about 15 minutes, so like for reference, but like I'm really curious. So I've been practicing intermittent fasting for like years. It's one of those things for like it's second nature for me. It's like I just don't even enjoy eating a meal before I don't know, like 1 or 2 p.m.
Yeah, you don't want to break the fast. Yeah,
kind of. It's also just like like after doing something for so long, it's like I physically can't enjoy eating. It's like I've just never been a very big like morning eating person. So intermittent fasting was always something that kind of like stood out to me. It worked. It's like having a shortened window of eating. If you guys don't know what this is, you basically give yourself like an allotted time of like a window when you should be eating. So like normally, I'll try to have like my first meal around like maybe 2 o'clock. Sometimes I'll even push it until like 6 or 7 o'clock, and then like stop eating around just before I go to sleep. There are a lot of different ways to do this. I've done like multi-day fasts and stuff. But what I'm curious about is that, like, going back to the initial point that you were making like 20 minutes ago about how, it's like Crohn's has a lot to do with just inflammation in general. And inflammation, I think, is one of those things that not enough people really talk about. They throw medication at you. They kind of talk about just like, you just take this, you'll fix all this stuff. It's like a Band-Aid. And, one of the things that I'm constantly trying to do as well for myself is just try to find ways to encourage a reduction of inflammation in your body. So like there are things like this fancy little red light that I have over here and stuff. It's like cold showers, steaming. It's like exercise in general. And intermittent fasting is a really big one for me. Are these things, like, have you tried to tackle over the years like different elements of reducing inflammation for your body to help alleviate any kind of conditions? Totally,
100%. Yeah, and I know we've talked about, I got to get in my cold showers because that's one big passion that I want to do. Yeah, it's so hard because me and the wife are on like a very similar schedule. So, and we have multiple showers, but occasionally it's like I'm always thinking to myself, do I want to do 2 showers? You know what I mean? Cold shower in one, warm in the other, because that's what she likes.
If you're gonna do it, if you're gonna do it, you do the warm shower. It's like get all toasty and warm, and then you're like, all right, babe,
Hop
jump
right in the
out
cold.
if she's there. And then just like on the coldest setting you can, and just like arms on the wall, and just let it just kind of like hit you and just breathe.
That's probably what I'll do. Yeah, because I'm a big believer in not wasting a lot of water either. So I'll probably end up doing that
Yeah.
because that's a good point. So from now on, starting tomorrow, babe, cold shower's done. Yeah, it's a done deal. I'm doing it. So that's one thing I got to do. Saunas, I really started getting into about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Obviously, I don't do them now because I'm sure it's a little funky now with COVID, the public saunas I used to go to. But yeah, intermittent fasting I started
Maybe. I don't
about
know.
yeah,
But
you never know.
maybe with the heat, I don't even know. It's like
Yeah.
there might be something to that.
It might even
Sorry,
help.
continue.
It might even help. Shit. Saunas might even be the only place where you don't get COVID. I mean, who knows? I just don't trust LA Fitness and cleaning their shit, to be honest with you. But I do love me a good sauna. But intermittent fasting is one thing that I started about 2 years ago when I went full vegan, and I have not stopped. It might be on occasion, like weekends, if we're going out to brunch with friends or something like that. But more often than not, I would probably say 5 out of 7 days I'm doing intermittent fasting, which I do. I do mine a little bit different because sometimes when I won't break the fast, obviously, unless it's with a juice, because I do a lot of juicing. So I might go like, instead of 16 hours fasted, I might go like 14 hours fasted, but I'll do some celery juice or something. And then I'll wait and do my quote unquote lunch around 2 p.m. And I only eat twice a day, sometimes I'll crank out little amino fuel like super fat or something with some good fats, maybe like an avocado as like a little snack throughout the day. But that's kind of what we were talking about, where we don't need to eat a lot. I mean, the perception that we have is we have to eat.
Super misconception.
Dude, it's insane, man. And, a lot of that has to do with our parents, so you can't hate on them for it, but you got to do your own research, and everybody's different. Every person reacts differently to food, but when we get out of the habit that we don't need food as much as we do, I think overall your lifestyle is going to change. Inflammation is going to go down. You're going to have less headaches. You got to get past that stuff. It's just like anything else to get into a habit, whether it takes 20, 21 days, they always say, get in the habit of just trying the intermittent fasting. You're going to feel a lot better and then continue that habit. It's really changed my life. And I honestly believe it's helped my symptoms for Crohn's as well.
So have you actually found like any difficulties with like the current climate? Because I mean, in general, it's like, especially at the beginning of the whole COVID thing, people are freaking out. I mean, like, in New York, it still is one of those things where it's difficult to find certain sundry goods, like paper towels or, whatever it might be. It's like, there's always like this weekend where it's just like, everybody wants to pick up button mushrooms. They have to have that and it's gone, for like a week, whatever it might be, and because you do a lot of focusing on just kind of like getting organic farmers market stuff and like clean eats and whatnot, are you noticing any of these fun changes for like you have to have like wait like an hour and a half just to get into the grocery store and stuff in
Totally.
Florida,
Yeah, absolutely. On a lot of different foods too. I mean, it's not just one thing in particular. I mean, we go to Sprouts a lot, which I don't know if you have Sprouts up north. You got Sprouts? It's kind of
you
like
can make them. Yeah, I mean, like we have them, but I mean,
no,
like,
I mean
I know
the,
people that make them.
the grocery store Sprouts.
Oh no. I was like, I know people that grow them.
I do love me a good Sprout though. It's kind of like a Trader Joe's. It's like an organic, grocery store. But we go there, and they've been the last 8 weeks. They've been sold out of almost everything because if it's
especially
not
Sprouts.
especially Sprouts. That's the one thing they actually don't carry ever, which is weird. Why are they called Sprouts? So I have noticed that a lot of organic stuff, and I don't know if it's because people want to eat a little bit more healthy now because of this whole COVID thing, which is a good thing. But, I kind of dig it because I'm willing to take the sacrifice where I think places like a Publix or, Winn-Dixie or Piggly Wiggly, whatever you got, in your city or state, I think they're going to start to realize that, we have to avoid these diseases in the future. And what that means is taking care of what we eat more. So I think you're going to see things like Trader Joe's and Sprouts and Whole Foods and these types of companies to where like organic was like a specialty food place. I think every place is now going to go a little bit more organic. Hopefully that's what I'm thinking. Cause, it has been tough for now, but I think it's going to be like this for a while. And then eventually it'll get to where it's just standard operating procedure where everything needs to be kind of farmer's market, organic type of style, or else people won't eat it because they were afraid of the next pandemic. So it might be better down long term. So.
And I mean, like commonly, like you kind of read about this a lot in literature, is that it's like most people have a tendency to kind of gravitate toward, like sugary, salty, garbage food. And again, like just for perspective as well, like I don't want to say any food is garbage, like I don't want people to think that I'm trying to shame anybody for eating, because we're just kind of talking about the element of just kind of like organic eating and stuff. But it's like a lot of people typically have a tendency to gravitate toward like salty, sugary foods that might not be quite as like healthy for you in the long term, out of just boredom, and
Right.
I'm kind of curious, like, what are your thoughts on this? The fact that right now people are basically just like, I mean, like on a daily basis, like I do these chats just because it inspires me to kind of like stay creative and stay active, and it kind of gives me something to not be just sitting on my computer watching YouTube or just on Netflix or something,
Totally.
Like, do you have any advice that you would give to people on ways to kind of keep them?
Yeah. I would probably say the big thing with what I started doing is I don't keep, if I sit down, I don't have my phone on me. So if I'm doing
That's
something,
huge.
if I'm doing something, I'm sitting down, whether it's Netflix and chilling with the wife, or if I'm sitting reading a book, I don't have my phone anywhere near me because it's a distraction. So that's probably number one. But then number two, when you're not near your phone or your screen or your TV, get outside, do something active. We always love to say that we're going to do something active when we're at home, but let's be honest, get outside, because once you're outside, your mind changes. You get that vitamin D in you, and you just kind of look at it, and you see outside, you look around, you start people watching, you see the greenery and the blue and the clouds, and there's endorphins that go in your brain that you can't even explain, that you don't get when you look at a screen. Of course, don't get me wrong, YouTube and Netflix is awesome, but we need a break.
There's a difference too, because you get like a dopamine hit, from like your screen. Like that's one of the reasons why like our attention span went from like 13 seconds to like literally 3 seconds. And it's like, because we're just waiting for like this immediate dopamine hit, and this is something you can actually curb. But I think it's also really important to kind of like have like future goals to look forward to. For example, like I am planning on doing. I saw one of my friends in Los Angeles was doing this, and I wanted to kind of tackle this. Is that 100 miles in May was like his challenge, and his goal is to basically try to accumulate over 100 or like up to 100 miles of running in the month of May.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I love that.
And it's like I caught onto this like just a few days ago, and I was like, well, I don't think I can catch up to that right now because I'm not necessarily that good of a runner. But it was something that I wanted to kind of like tackle, and so I'm doing it for June. So it's like every day for the month of June, I'm at least running 3.3 miles. And if I don't run, let's say like on the 2nd, on the 3rd, I will run 6.6 miles. It's like distances that are like long for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it's just about the slow accumulation of building this stuff up. And that way, like you have goals so you can actually track it with little like apps and stuff. Keep yourself accountable. But I mean, like, I think that that's a really great thing as well, is like try to find little goals that you can set for yourself in the future that you can psych yourself up for and get to.
Totally.
Are you doing anything like that? Like, do you, and not necessarily running 100 miles, but
yeah. No, so I'm doing a lot of goals myself. A lot of it's writing more.
Yeah.
I used to do it all the time, and I used to draw a lot. So I'm trying to make a goal to at least once a week do something creative on the pad, whether that's writing, because again, I always go back to the screen. So when I have my blog and my podcast, I'm typing everything on the screen. But then you type, and then when you have like kind of a moment where you don't know what to type, sometimes you switch over to Facebook or YouTube, and there's something about that keyboard that just gets you. You're not 100% focused, but it's interesting when you're on a pad and
you're thinking hotkeys. Also, you're just like, well, if I hit this, then it'll take me to that. And then at least that's what I work.
Totally.
It's just
It's just
I get this like Stream Deck right here, where it's like this thing right here. It's like I literally push this, and like it'll take me to anything I want, and it's like pre-programmed.
It's so funny, dude.
It's dangerous.
Oh, and not only this, but like to go back to this. So this Rodecaster. So this right here, I can press it, and it's got my theme music on it. So it's literally cut my editing in half, but that's what's so crazy is I went from like spending a lot of time editing on the laptop to now it's cut in half, to your point, using different tools and stuff. So I'm like, I could use that other time to spend more time on the computer, or I could do something I don't normally do. And that's what I'm trying to do, is use this time, not just to, set goals like you are, which is great, but on top of that, doing stuff that is out of my comfort zone, or maybe things that I used to do from my childhood that somewhere along the lines, the phone made me lose track of it. And that's what I'm doing a lot more of is I have drawings all here from like when I was in high school and college And I kind of look at them. I hung them up now. They didn't used to be hung up. And I look at them because it motivates me to draw a little bit more, write a little bit more, appreciate the pencil a little bit more, and not just the thumb tap. So just getting outside the box. You know, going back to my childhood is really my main goal.
So we only have a couple minutes left, but I was going to see if you might be able to actually just kind of give people an idea of where, like, whether they're seeing this now or seeing this later, like, you know, where they can actually go to find you, and like, you know, check out your podcast as well. I think that's like a huge thing, and I love it. I listen to it regularly, so hopefully more people will check it out because of this.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the Berardo. My website, theberardo.com. Has all my content, you know, YouTube, podcast, or you could just go to anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify. It's the Berardo podcast. So theberardo.com is everything.
I do have a question. On I use like Apple Podcasts because it's just on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, for some reason yours pops up twice. Do you know about this, or do you know why? Like
No.
every time you post something, it's like there are two separate Berardo podcast folders. So like I don't know if you have two
Really?
Apple accounts for some reason or something, but
And it's
or,
only
like, it's
Apple?
mirroring. That's the only one I've checked because it's the only one I use.
Oh,
but,
yeah, okay.
yeah. It's
No,
something
but
that, you know, it's like go on your iPhone later and stuff, like when you're not sitting down, you know, and just kind of like pull up, type in Berardo podcast on Apple Podcasts and see
Yeah.
it, but it pops up for both of them for me. It's funny.
no, that's a good point. That's a good call. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably a bad thing, but maybe more people are tapping in because there's two.
I'm afraid to like delete one of them, thinking that it might like I don't know why. Like it's as simple as like resubscribing, but I don't know why. It's
No, dude,
I
no,
gotta look into that.
that's good to know. I'm gonna check on that because I did use Anchor for a while, and Anchor was free, and I just didn't like the platform itself because I'm told they get to keep the content. I read a bunch of articles that they actually have the content if you post it, so that could be it too. Maybe Anchor's like double posting it, so I'm gonna check on that. It's a good call out, but. Either way, man, thanks for having me on, dude. This was awesome. It's great to see. I hope to see you in person soon, and we definitely got to do this more often. I'm gonna get you on the podcast here one of the weeks.
Well, one of these days, you know, like Hank and I are more likely going to move back down to Florida, so I mean, like it'll probably be a lot easier for us to hang out.
I'm counting the days, bro. I'm counting the days.
All right, brother. Well, I'll talk to you later. Thank you again for taking the time, and thanks for everybody that's tuning in and catching this later. So
Thank you,
take
bro.
care.
Peace.